What is up, YouTubes? It is pre-release time, and we are back on Zendikar for Zendikar Rising. Whoa, what is happening here? Take two. It's pre-release time, and Zendikar is rising. No, come on. Why is this happening? This pre-release guide is for Zendikar Rising. Zendikar Rising. Is this a joke to you? This is what we're gonna do. Just up every time. The name of the set is Zendikar Rising. Ugh. It's pre-release time for our latest trip to Zendikar, and we're going to ignore any adjective describing motion on the plane. Moving on to what's actually happening in the set, the Eldrazi are gone. They are off Zendikar, but the Royal is still alive and kicking. And the Royal is Zendikar's natural defense against anything not Zendikar. So it's keeping everyone on their toes, especially any inhabitants trying to just survive on this plane. We're going to get into this set, go through all the new mechanics and the new card types. Yes, we have some very exciting new card types. We'll talk about all the archetypes, and of course, I'll give you some tips and tricks to take down your pre-release. Now, yeah, we're still living in some pretty crazy times. So of course, stay safe. And if nothing else, hopefully this guide can help you take down the pre-release at your kitchen table. Don't hesitate to let me know if you have any questions about the set. Hope you enjoyed the video. This is the pre-release guide for Zendikar Rising. Let's get into it. Our first new mechanic is Party, or Party Members Matter. As a D&D fan, this is awesome, and with us trying to survive a beyond treacherous landscape, it would make sense that you need friends. On Zendikar, we can build a party with 4 different classes, or in Magic terms, creature types. The ones that matter for party counting are Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard. Notice some cards can fill multiple party roles, but you can only count each creature once. You will need 4 different creature cards in play to have a full party. Every 2-color deck has the potential to build a full party, so be mindful of your creature makeup when building your deck and which colors can help fill which gaps. Our next mechanic is a returning one, and it is Landfall. When a land falls onto your side of the battlefield, something happens, like getting a 1/1 counter on your creature. Now let's get into the new card types being introduced into Magic the Gathering with Zendikar Rising. Double-faced cards. First, let's look at the double-faced land cards. You can only play and use one side, but while in our hand, we can pick which side is the one we need. Missing red? No problem. Looking for white? This card has you covered. The far more unique versions, and the ones that are truly special to the game of Magic, are the double-faced cards that can be played as a spell or land. Of course, this adds an element of consistency we have not seen before, so there's an attempt at balancing this new design. For example, with the mythic rare versions, the land enters tapped unless we lose 3 life, while the other side is an expensive yet potentially very powerful spell. The other options are these hybrid double-faced cards at rare and uncommon, and they can be played as a spell or be a land that enters tapped. Oh, and last but not least, a personal favorite mechanic is back as well with Kicker. Play a spell early and it'll do its thing, or kick it into high gear and pay the additional kicker cost to get more value. It's great for limited, gives us great flexibility when playing, and brings more possibilities to our builds. Speaking of builds, let's get into the archetypes. Zendikar Rising is a dual color focused set with all 10 working just fine. So let's get into the cards we need to keep an eye out for, starting with the gold cards for each. Blue-white is focused on the party patrol. We are allowed to have fun, but our opponent is not. Of course, we have flyers as well, but as Linvala shows us, sometimes they're here just to keep an eye on what our opponent is doing or keep them in check. The same goes for Archon of Emeria. Then there's Archpriest of Iona, who just likes to party, and Thieving Skydiver, if you kick it, ends up rolling a nat 20 to show our opponent that their equipment becomes her equipment. We can bubble snare their big creature, counter their spells, and bind up their planeswalkers to make sure nothing gets too out of hand. Then hopefully we can get other creatures like Emeria Captain, Shepherd of Heroes, and Seafloor Stalker to build out our board and keep the party rockin'. Speaking of rocks, White-Red is Warriors and their toys, or just Warrior Mosh Pit, led by Nahiri, who some may say is the queen of rocking out. Sorry, Soren. Anyway, Akiri helps us draw cards while attacking with equipped creatures. Morog is an obscene mythic that keeps us attacking if we play lands, and Squad Commander makes our creatures indestructible if we have a full party. We also have great combat tricks like Resolute Strike and Inordinate Rage, as well as classic removal like Sizzling Barrage, Smite the Monstrous, and Spike Field Hazard. This combo wants to attack a lot, so keep an eye out for some of the equipment in the set, although I must say I'm disappointed in the lack of equipment. There's not that much to get excited about, so you may just focus more on the warrior tribal pieces. Next is white-black with cleric tribal life gain. We want clerics, so we have angel clerics that can just win us the game. We have a demon cleric, even a vampire cleric. All of these create real problems for our opponent, and if they manage to deal with them, Aura makes sure something comes back to take its place. Gaining life is at the very least annoying for our opponent to deal with, as long as we can keep playing efficient creatures, using removal for our opponent's bigger threats, and keep a path open to get in for damage, we should be hard to keep up with. I also really like Scion of the Swarm, which can get out of hand pretty quickly, Luminarch Aspirant to make sure everything is a threat, and Demon's Disciple as a way to get our opponents to sacrifice that last remaining hope they have. White-green is Landfall is all we need. Marasa Rootgrazer may be a picky eater, but that doesn't stop it from making sure we hit potentially multiple landfall triggers each turn. The cutest creature in the set is here with Carrion Jabora. Then Fearless Fledgling is, well, not so much, and aren't we lucky to have Canopy Baloth, the creepiest looking creature, just hanging out. At least the land look great in this set, right? Ideally, you can build your board out, have multiple creatures getting a ton of value from each landfall trigger, and even some combat tricks or removal spells to make sure those cute and not so cuddly creatures get in for damage. Seriously, what are you smiling at? Is it Ancient Green Warden? Because if so, I don't blame you. This card is great. Anyway, blue-black is our latest mill archetype, but more specifically, Rogue Mill. Zareth brings us ninjutsu, but for rogues, where we can bounce it out of play and get this one in attacking, which I think is amazing. Our uncommon gold card mills our opponents every time our rogues get to attacking. Our opponents having 8 cards in their graveyard is important because then it turns on some additional value to our other spells, like Merfolk Windrobber, Black Bloom Rogue, and Relic Golem. Blue-black seems to have no shortage of efficient creatures and flexible interaction. Black even has enchantment removal and mana fixing in this set if you're willing to lose some life over it. Ideally, you can get some rogues down, mill your opponent, and then leave them with a headache on how they're going to get out of this alive. Now, blue-red is Wizard Tribal Spells Matter. Umara Mystic is a solid flyer that can do some surprising damage when you pair it with instants like Deliberate, Into the Royal, and Cinderclasm. Then Kaza helps us cheat out some more expensive spells based on how many wizards we have in play, which brings me to an interesting point on this archetype. They are the least interested in building a full party. Sure, Synchronized Spellcraft appreciates a full party, but most others do just care about wizards like Fissure Wizard, Windrider Wizard, and Umara Wizard. Then once this archetype gets rolling, getting ahead on cards and finding ways to deal damage with Rockslide Sorcerer and Relic Amulet should not be a problem. Just make sure you don't tunnel vision on the non-creature spells and end up with too few creatures in your build. Next up is blue-green, and it's Kicker into high gear with some ramp. Our gold cards do just that, help us ramp, gain some life, and even remove counters to copy kicked spells. Seems pretty good, so what are the top kicker spell options? Roost of Drakes adds a lot of value to kicked spells, getting us 2/2 flying drakes each time we do so. Marasa Sproutling brings back our best kicker card from the graveyard to our hand, and Taunting Arbormage can basically win us the game, allowing for all but one of our attackers to get in for a lethal attack. Vine Gecko makes our kick spells cheaper, while others help us find more spells with kicker, but keep in mind a lot of these spells and kicker costs are at least 5 to 6 mana to cast, so early game plays that keep us from getting overrun will be important, as well as having a couple ramp spells like Roiling Regrowth to get us kicking our spells sooner than later. Then once that happens, we should be able to build quite a nice lead for ourselves. Word of caution here though, don't be too greedy waiting to cast spells for their kicker cost and lose the game before it really begins. Now black-red is party hard aggro. No one should venture alone, so Ravager's Mace is here to make all of our creatures a menace to deal with. If you're lucky enough to open Zagras, well, stealing heartbeats should not be too difficult with this obscenely strong vampire rogue. If a planeswalker comes a knockin', this party will not be stopping. We have a lot of death touch, we play a lot of death metal, and songs that get our opponent's creatures to join in the mosh pit. Black-red is often an aggro color combo, and that's what we have here. Aggro creatures, some subtle combat tricks, and demons. Very powerful demons. Your opponents will love it. Maybe. Probably not. But maybe. Now black-green is 1/1 counter power. Moss Pit Skeleton wound up here when the mosh pit got too rough for him, but he will not stay down. Nissa is also here to really cause some problems for our opponent, as is Grakmaw. Yeah, our top end can be very difficult to outclass or ever actually remove for good. Green also has the most landfall in this set too, so there's some strong synergy here between landfall and the 1/1 counters, as we see with Territorial Scythecat, Scale the Heights, and Skyclave Shade. One of our highest synergy cards is Iridescent Hornbeetle, which helps us go super wide. Oran Reef Ooze gets our board growing huge, and finally we have some kicker too, which helps our tiny creatures, like Cragplat Baloth, be just that much bigger. I really like the 1/1 counters game plan because they help our early plays scale well into the late game. Thankfully this combo can win by going tall or wide. And now last, but certainly not least, is Red-Green, which is the quintessential landfall aggro archetype, but it also likes 1/1 counters as much as anyone. Freshfire Elemental gets the pressure going early, Phyllith World Sculptor builds our board, then makes every plant into a serious threat with landfall triggers. I really like Gnarlid Colony as well because it gives all of our creatures with counters trample. We never back down from a fight here, and we should have enough to take care of whatever puny blockers our opponents try and play out. So that does it for the archetypes. Now comes the discussion of how do we handle these new mechanics? How many lands should we play, and what color pairs will be best? As always, build to your card pool's strengths first and foremost, no matter what rankings you see. With that said, I think the three Naya colors, white, red, and green, have an advantage in a slower format like Sealed, and in a set like this where creatures are smaller. They have the highest top end, and their board building potential with cards of the common and uncommon rarity is pretty strong. And that's important because it means they should be able to find a way to break through a board stall by just having the biggest bodies. Then builds with blue will most likely rely on flyers or unblockable creatures to get in for lethal damage, so use your removal selectively against them, unless they play this monstrosity and then good luck, I guess. Black again has great removal and is the color I expect to be the most unpredictable or have the most surprising plays to get back in front. Just about all of its rares are fantastic for limited, and just one of them can swing the game back in their favor. With regard to land count, you can start with 17 lands. If your build focuses on landfall triggers, plan on starting with 18 lands in your deck. The same goes for kicker focused builds because these spells are just expensive. We need to hit our land drops in this set, so even 19 lands is not a crazy idea, especially if you're heavy on landfall because those additional lands still provide value to your creatures. In regard to the double-faced land spell cards, I would cut one land for every 2 double-faced cards in my build. That's where I'm starting at. That's my mindset when I'm going to build my deck. Now, what about the speed of the format? It's gonna be slower than M21, no doubt in my mind, for multiple reasons. The double-faced cards, the lands come into play tapped, which slows things down. A lot of the creatures we're playing on turns 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, and 3 CMC, are only 1 or 2 power. The creatures in the early game are smaller in this set, and landfall and kicker spells are gonna pull players into more of a mid to late game strategy where they get a lot more value out of the cards they're playing, which tends to slow things down as well. Now, there could definitely be some people still going for that all-out aggro game plan, so don't play too greedy of a curve. Don't just expect everything to be able to be kicked or wait for the late game. But yeah, I just don't see aggro being as consistent or as powerful in this set, generally speaking. The next thing I want to hit on is that this set feels as high synergy as any we've seen throughout the last few years, because a lot of the mechanics work for multiple, if not all, of the dual color archetypes. The party mechanics just about everywhere. 1/1 counters is a thing for multiple ones. We have Call Me Crazy, but probably everyone playing land, so landfall is going to be pretty prevalent. That gives us a lot more flexibility, hopefully, in our design space and in our building of our deck, but that also means we have to consider and take into account more variables when trying to figure out how to use our removal or interact with what our opponent is doing. So to use that to our advantage, the first thing I'm going to recommend is when you're building your deck, go for consistency. So if you're looking through the cards you can play and you have to make some cuts, say you have too many 3-drops and you have to make some cuts there, remove the creature that either has the more redundant creature type or maybe doesn't scale as well into the late game. That way you can add more consistency throughout your deck and increase the power level or synergy amongst the cards you're playing. Also, don't overlook Stonework Pack Beast. I think this is one of the best common creatures in the set. It fills any party role. It's only costing 2 generic mana, gets you a 2/1 that's a decent blocker, could potentially attack, and also fixes your mana if you really feel like splashing. I don't think it's going to be all that common in this set, but it definitely could be depending on what bombs you pull and whatnot and what gaps you need to fill in your deck. When you're using your removal and interaction, you want to try and remove those pieces from your opponent so they don't get the value. Like, for example, if they have 3 creatures on the board, say 2 are clerics and 1's a warrior, remove the warrior creature if all things are equal so that they lose that party ability. It kind of brings a drawback in for pacifism effects like Bubble Snare. It doesn't remove the creature, so your opponent gets to keep that thing on board, but it's still just a really efficient, great blue spell. And then the last thing I'll bring up is that you'll see some creatures say when they attack or enter the battlefield, you either have to or may get to bounce a land to your hand. You don't want to bounce land to your hand in the early game because that's just really setting you back and now you can't cast your good spells. But in the mid to late game, when you could use the land returning to your hand to get an additional landfall trigger, that's when you want to do it. You don't want to set yourself back and prevent you from curving out or playing your bigger spells as soon as possible. But if it lets you just get additional landfall triggers, like that's why those cards are in the set, that's why you would play them. Only do it when it's giving you additional value and not setting you back. Or maybe get really clever and bounce a double-faced card that you initially played as the land to then play it as a spell instead. Hey, that's not too shabby. But alrighty folks, we reached the end. That's going to do it for our pre-release guide for this latest trip to Zendikar. Let me know if you have any questions, hit that like button and subscribe, and definitely check out Card Kingdom. They sponsor the channel and are the best place to go if you're looking to pick up any singles or sealed from Zendikar Rising. Best of luck at your pre-release, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy. Peace.